back to the show. This is The Law Show on CL 650.
I fought for law, the law won. I fought for law, the law won. I needed money.
Hey, and welcome back to The Law Show on CL 650. Today we're talking about personal injury, and we have from Macquarie Hunter, Kevin Hyde, partner at Macquarie Hunter, and Nate Hartney, associate at Macquarie Hunter. We have talked about some of the myths around personal injury, and we really only got to one about, do you go to trial? And that is very important to have that sort of hammer, I guess, that the threat that you are going to go to trial. Now, a lot of times when someone has an accident, ICBC, the adjusters say, well, okay, you're 70% at fault or you're 100% at fault. And because they're ICBC, most lay people would say, well, I guess it's my fault, and I'm just going to accept that. But is that the definitive answer, or can it be amended? And how is that determined?
This is, I think, one of the myths that's out there is that you're bound by ICBC's determination of who's at fault for an accident, and that's absolutely not true. Just because ICBC says you're at fault at the start, that doesn't mean you don't have a claim. If you don't agree with that, you can bring a claim, hire a lawyer, bring a claim, and the judge will decide who's at fault. And the judge's determination supersedes whatever ICBC determined at the start.
And often, sorry, just to add to that, Zach, often what is the case is once you hire a lawyer, ICBC realizes that their internal determination of liability is going to be scrutinized a little more carefully now through the examination for discovery process and, interviewing and getting statements from independent witnesses. And that position they initially took on liability often changes as there might be a court date looming with regards to a determination of liability.
So they sit up a little straighter and take a little more notice knowing that you're being represented properly.
Exactly.
Now, say it is 100% your fault, but you are injured, right? You've had a bad accident and you caused it, and there's no getting around the fact that maybe you were to blame, but you're injured and you're going to be off work for several months. You still have a claim with ICBC even though it's your fault, right?
How it works is if you're at fault for the accident, you're not going to be suing for the damages of loss of enjoyment of life or whatnot in that case. However, you may also, ICBC is acting as a secondary insurer, so you may also have entitlements through your own benefits plan.
Okay.
And it's also dependent on a situation if you're injured at work or whatnot, a slip and fall at work or an injury at the workplace, then workers' compensation.
I've always wondered about that. So what kind of coverage you get if you're at fault? Now, then you have the complicating factor that you're the driver of the car and you're at fault, but somebody else as a family member or friend is in the car with you and you've caused the accident. So then they would in turn be suing you as the driver, right? And that's not always a bad thing, because if they have, say, $5 million worth of liability insurance, then there's money there that you can help to look after your life, right?
Yes, we have people coming in all the time. I remember a case from a few years back where a lady came in and she was very injured from this accident. She'd missed work as a result of the accident, but she was very hesitant to, and it was a single motor vehicle accident where her husband was driving, very hesitant to start an actual claim, and the 2-year limitation was approaching. I think it was just in a matter of days. Because she didn't quite understand the system. And once we explained this to her, that, it may seem a little strange adding as a defendant to your own husband and suing him, but essentially you're suing and naming them to get access at their insurance policy. So as long as they're properly insured, this is definitely the right thing to do, and your partner should not be offended by it in any which way. That's why you have insurance. And
so, Nate, what's your advice to people when they're getting insurance and you have family in the car all the time?
Well, yeah, I mean, I just went through this myself, renewing my insurance, and the maximum ICBC will offer you is $5 million in third-party liability. The reason that you should always get that if you have family is because the most likely person that's going to injure your family is you. If you have kids in the car and you're driving them around all the time, you're the one of all the people in the world that they're going to have to sue. You're the most likely person, so you want to have the maximum insurance so that they can access it if something bad happens.
God forbid, if you're in an accident with your entire family in the car and you only have a basic insurance coverage of $200,000 and the ump of $1 million, and it might not cover everything that all your family members might have otherwise been entitled to.
And the other thing to think about too is that maximum amount covers everybody who would launch an action against you. So if it's $5 million and there's 3 people in the car that are injured, it's total for everybody. It's not $5 million for each person.
And people in another vehicle if you're at fault.
So, yeah. Free legal advice when you're getting your insurance. Get $5 million.
And it's not much more. It
isn't. I get it.
Yeah.
I get it on all my vehicles. I have one vehicle I drive, I don't know, 2,000 kilometers a year. It's got $5 million. There's not much difference between $1 million
You're
and $5 million.
protecting your family. You're not. Don't be silly and try to save a few
And
bucks.
that also goes to, we were briefly discussing this outside of the studio here, getting the UMP coverage, which everyone...
Explain what UMP is. Because
it's underinsured motor vehiclist protection, and it means that if you're in an accident with someone who's underinsured, which means their policy, they're at fault, and their policy won't cover the full amount of the claim that you're entitled to or the people in your vehicle, then this UMP steps in that case.
And also, it
some
covers you. What I found very interesting is it covers you. I'm going away soon, spring break with my family, and in the United States, you have Flo who lets you decide how much insurance you want to pay. You've seen those commercials. Well, that means if you don't want to pay much, you don't have much coverage, right? So if you stand in California, step in front of a car and someone hits you and they don't have much coverage, well, ICBC pops in at that point and gives you $1 million, and then you can get it to $2 million.
Exactly.
Which I paid for, and that's inexpensive.
When you're down in the States, as American drivers here, they often don't have a good insurance policy. Often at times just $200,000. So this protects you in those situations. And I just renewed my insurance as well. And for an extra $30, you get another $1 million of UMP coverage. So in the big picture, and I have seen those worst case scenarios where the person didn't pay for that extra UMP coverage and they were hit by a stolen vehicle, when they were driving in Washington State. And, they could have been covered for much more if they'd simply spent that $30 and got the extra $1 million.
So I can see in these situations where you have, mom or dad driving and the kids are injured in the car, that's a very awkward situation. That's when you really need to get legal advice. So you might have to sue one of your family members and to get access to that insurance. But when you go to a law office and you see your team at McQuarrie Hunter, are you expediting the process? Is it faster than going and just dealing with ICBC directly?
It's not necessarily faster, but to get you a proper and fair settlement, you should talk to a lawyer first.
Is that a myth, though, that getting a lawyer will move things along?
I explain this to every one of my clients in the first meeting. If someone comes and sees you in the first meeting without seeing the clinical records, without knowing the full story that this person has, and they still have ongoing injuries, and they tell you you're going to get X amount of dollars, well, they're essentially full of it. You have to go through all the clinical records. You have to properly assess where these injuries are in fact going. So if they're not resolved and they're ongoing, you don't know what that claim's worth at that point. And so it does take time. And as I mentioned earlier, you don't want to be settling a claim unless that person has fully recovered and you can properly assess the claim, or alternatively, if it is plateaued to a certain degree and you have the proper reports from the experts to look into that, magical crystal ball, because they're the only ones that can really do it, and tell you what this person's future looks like as a result of these injuries from the motor vehicle accident.
So if you have somebody that's sort of in a long, protracted recovery and they're, you could be at this for how long? Over a year?
Well over a year. Let's take the extreme case where someone has. We had a case in the past where someone was in a coma for several weeks, and they were never going to return to where they were at their pre-accident level. They may never be employable again, but we have to wait and see. We have to see what the medical experts say over time, and that takes years in certain cases to get the first report and then get follow-up reports. And then essentially we're at a position where that recovery is somewhat plateaued, or we have the reports to tell us what this person's future is going to look like. Then we can start talking settlement, and that could take up to 3-4 years.
And are they able to get access to funds with their recovery from ICBC while that process is going on?
Yes, they're getting a lot of the treatment covered under their Part 7s in certain cases, as ICBC is the secondary insurer in that. But they can also, you can negotiate in some circumstances, and from the extreme case to other cases where the medical documents support that person's off work for a certain amount of time and they're incurring these expenses in their day-to-day life. And it's very subjective. It's up to ICBC, essentially. They have their discretion to determine whether it's the case, but you can negotiate in advance in certain circumstances.
So they'll pay partially to keep you getting your treatments and things
They know
before they settle, right?
Yes, they'll give you they'll pay you in advance essentially of that settlement amount, and we can assist you in negotiating that on your behalf. If, for example, you can't afford to pay your rent, all of a sudden you're about to be kicked out of your house because you haven't returned to work yet, we can go to ICBC and look to help you out, get an advance on the settlement.
Interesting. Okay, we're going to take a quick break. We still have more myths to go through when it comes to personal injury. We have personal injury lawyers, Kevin Hyde, partner at Macquarie Hunter, and Nate Hartney, associate at Macquarie Hunter, talking about personal injury, and we'll continue the conversation next on The Law Show on CL 650.
There's more of the show still ahead. This is The Law Show on CL 650.